Singing is not my thing. Talk well.
And that is why we brought Jaclyn on today, because she's just another wonderful human being that is with us on our Earth walk and walking with us on this journey, doing amazing things with our school board and just being with us on our journey. So we invited Jaclyn in this afternoon with Uncle Mike, Grandmother Renee Thomas Hill, and we're going to have a really wonderful conversation today. Well, they will. And I will step out of the room after everyone says hello and introduces themselves. And Uncle Mike has some amazing information to share with our viewers today. So welcome to our viewers and welcome to our wonderful relatives.
So hello, once again, back again after, this is our 10 weeks. And when we finish up next week, that'll be 12 weeks. I'll tell you something that's absolutely true. The hour we spend with you every 2 weeks, we travel together, all of us, 107,000 kilometers on our orbit around the sun. It's absolutely true. That's how much space we go through together in an hour. So can you imagine this? In 2 weeks, when we finish up, we'll have gone 217 million kilometers through space together on our orbit around the sun. I find that amazing. I just wanted to bring that to your attention. That's why I say you don't get a minute of this time back, you know. That's why we're going to make every minute of our 107,000 kilometers work for you today. Hello.
I love that reminder. Don't we look good for all that walk? We're in shape, I'll tell you. So welcome, everyone. It's still nice to see everyone. And it's a good reminder how much we don't really realize how our life expands, how we are in this very moment, how much we have done. And it's most, as we say, very interesting to hear these words and to know that, hey, I'm not just standing still, I'm still moving. And that's the most important thing, is knowing that we're in that power of life, and that's going. That's what they talk about in our way, is we never called it chores. We never called it what they call, as they would say, it was always your doing. So I can imagine what I'm doing in all in that rotation around the sun. Boy, I'm busy. And so I'm really grateful that I still can run with time. So thank you for being with us today, and enjoy this time with us.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me today. I'm so excited to be part of this conversation. And you know, this was something that we heard a couple weeks ago, and I was so interested and captivated by this story that Uncle Mike is going to tell us today. And hopefully we can have really good conversations. And this is about journeying together. So I love that you started that way. Thank you.
That's one thing I teach when I teach storytelling and screenwriting and essay writing is, if you make me read an essay and it takes me 15 minutes, I'm giving you 15 minutes of my entire life that I don't get back. So you better give me something. So hopefully we'll give you something today. Let's roll along with the and how we're going to do today is pretty straightforward. We have the moms here. And I'm going to tell a story. And then I'm going to step out of the spotlight and the conversation that comes out of that. And I'll, when I'm finished my story, I'll ask you a question. And how we invited Jaclyn to join with us with Renee and me is you'll see when we get there. So let's get her going, Jody. There it is. Is that the whole screen, or is that what we're watching, right? I can't remember how we did this before, but if that's okay, if everybody can see it. And if those of you at home, just lean in closer to your screen so you can get all those alpha waves from that 29 point or 30.0 beats per second. Here we go. This is how we look at the world that we live in, and this is what the old ones say. My elders and the community that I raised, where I was raised, and this is how they express it. And this is not Iroquois people taking control of the whole continent. No, it's not at all. Or the Haudenosaunee or the Ongwahumwe or the Wisnahunawajaga. This is how they talked about it. They said, where the sun rises in the east is the eastern door, and where the sun sets in the west is the western door, and the blue sky over our head is the roof of one long house, and all the people who live in that long house are one family. And so we have a rafter. And as you can see from the depiction on the slide, there are rafters all the way across. So there's the Mi'kmaq rafter, there's the Abenaki rafter, there's the Cayuga rafter, there's the Potawatomi rafter, there's the Saulteaux rafter, there's the Pagan rafter, there's the Cree rafter, there's the Nisga'a and Quahiu, all the way out. Everybody's got a rafter in that longhouse. And as you can see, we're all braced by a covenant with each other of eating, healing, and protection. So our braces for those rafters include a conscientiousness with each other to protect each other. No one eats until we all eat. No one is happy until we're all happy. No one is healed until we're all healed. Everybody gets to eat. Everybody gets to be healed. Everybody gets to be happy. Those are the foundational principles that bind those rafters together and make the house strong. So what does that have to do with what we're going to talk about today? Well, over the years, I heard the elders say these kinds of things, and they would say, if it wasn't for our people, Canada wouldn't be a nation today. And then they would say, where the sun rises in the eastern door, and they'd talk about the rafters. And they would also teach us things like how they started to describe the two-row wampum, and the way they phrased it was like this: we were happy to raise you up in our land, is what they said to the crown. So over the years, I was puzzled by what they were talking about. Like you do when you talk to elders and they say something that kind of goes over your head. But after you think about it and you wonder what they're talking about, you begin to piece it together. And that's what our story is going to be about today. Let's go to the next slide, Jody. So here's what happened in Canada over the last 10 years. You have two prime ministers in a row. And they looked at what was going on in the country with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, with Indian day schools on reserve, with boarding schools or residential schools off the reserve, and the idea of when they took children away from their families in the 60s. And these things were said to be very painful for the Native people. And two prime ministers in a row agreed with that. And I won't tell you what you can read yourself, but Stephen Harper said, we've been carrying, this is talking to us, you've been carrying the burden of what we did to you for far too long. You're not going to have to do that anymore. We're going to partner with you to remedy what we did to you. And then when he accepted the calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, Justin Trudeau said the same thing, almost word for word, and that he put it on the country and the government of Canada that what they did was a bad thing. It created pain, and that now we're going to fix it. We're going to help. We're going to work with you to do that. What is that about?
Jody must be running low.
Is your computer running out of gas, Jody? There you go. So, as you can see, the apology for Indian residential schools said, the burden of this experience has been on your shoulders far too long. And they called it a burden. And that's fascinating that they would call it a burden. and that we have been working on recovering from this for a long time, our people in our communities and so on. And that Trudeau said a nation-to-nation relationship. It's fascinating that he would use that word nation-to-nation. Let's roll along with our show before we run out of gas, Jody. So a total renewal of what relationship was he talking about? What was, and believe me, the Governor General of Canada, the Queen of England, the Prime Minister of Canada, and the Ministers of Indian Affairs know this story. Believe me, they know this story. That's what they're referring to. Roll along. So they're talking about extending the rafters now. We got Tigadis on the Winasano is a way that we talk about it. Sagodia Dinyonde, that we're going to move the rafters. And as you can see from this depiction here, this is a longhouse frame that I and my son Marcus built actually down on the reserve. And we had it with a few other folks that came and helped us do that. And you can see the rafters and you can see the braces for the rafters in that particular type of architecture. And so this is what this is referring to. Sagodi Adinyonde means they adopt them. And Tigadis on the Winasaro is how we say the rafters are moved. And when we add something to the long house that goes from the sun rising to the sunset. Let's go again, Jody. And as you see, there's the relation, the 2 row says that we stood you up in our land. Like I said a while ago, that's how the 2 row works. And it'll last as long as the sun rises. All right, let's go again. And that there's belts, wampum belts that commemorate that. These are the different types of belts. On the left side, you see the rafter belts, and then to the left, right of that is the longhouse belt. That's the many built a house, and you can see the encoded sign language in there. Many built the house. Okay. So what do they mean when they're talking about that now? Tiga wanio con wisnohora wajage doga de honda honjoni on sagodinyon de ne chionqueta squajira doga une onka ne quachira ke. Uwara ne honda wanondo se doga one sagod wanondo se. They're saying that when some part of the longhouse has good feelings for someone, or a family, or a clan, or another people, they can adopt them. And it has to be accepted by the whole family to adopt them in. That's how the adoption works among our people. Okay, go again. So, in 1867, colonies over here, Upper Canada, Lower Canada, they decided they wanted to be a nation state. And they had the British North America Act that was completed in England by the Privy Council and the government of England to create the Dominion of Canada. That was in 1867. We know about it. We just had the 150th anniversary a couple years ago. The honor of the crown meant that Queen Victoria had to send somebody to confirm that, and she sent her son to Brantford, Ontario, at the Mohawk Chapel. This is where a special event took place on October 1st, 1869, with Arthur the Duke of Connaught, the 19-year-old son of Queen Victoria, who came to Brantford. Let's go to the next slide. So here's what happened. When he came to Brantford, he stayed at the Kirby Hotel, and he went deer hunting down at Long Point, down on Lake Erie. And this was in late September. And then on October 1st, the whole entourage from Brantford, the the privileged classes of people came in their carriages and went to the Mohawk Chapel in Brantford, Ontario, and they took Arthur, the Duke of Connaught, there. And he received then what they call a condolence ceremony. And at the ceremony, they hung a name around his neck. And according to the United Empire Loyalist Gazette and writers from the International Orders of the Daughters of the Empire, on that day, Canada's rafter was raised inside the Long House of Many Nations. This is how they say it. This is not us saying it. This is Canadian people saying it. On that day, Canada's rafter was raised inside the Long House of Many Nations. Let's go again, Jody. So this is out of a history book, and he was given the name Garakonye. And I got the slides backwards here because I should have went to this one first, because it shows the depiction of exactly what happened. Now, let me tell you how I found out about this based on what the elders were telling me about. If it wasn't for your people, Canada wouldn't be a country today, and we stood you up in our country. Well, this came from my work on a film called Where the Spirit Lives. This was back in the 80s, right at the frontier of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission over residential schools, actually. And I was doing some research, and I found a woman by the name of Jane McGarry and her memoirs. And she had been they had the branch of the IODE in Lethbridge, Alberta, named after her. And she had in her memoirs handwritten notes of these events. And Angela Fines, of course, from the United Empire Loyalists here in Brantford, also had records as well. And what they said was Karakonye, that's a Wolf Clan name. That's a real Wolf Clan name, was hung around the neck of Arthur. And they also said at that time, this is what happened. On that day, Arthur was taken and led by the arm up down the rows of people that were gathered by the Mohawk Chapel. And he'd talk as he went. And he would stop and he would address the people. And how they do naming is where they have a warrior or a boy is taken and presented to all the mothers, to all the warriors, and they're all reminded now of this child is your son. And you will teach him what he needs to know about doing what he has to do as a warrior. And as he went, and as the IOD and the UALers say, he exhorted as he went, leading the chief around there and singing too, right? Wait, wait, oh, wait, how we are, wait, hi, oh, hey, hi, oh. Hey, hey, oh, hey, how we are, wait, hi, oh, hey, hi, oh. How we hi oh, hey how we oh, how we hi oh, we how we hi oh, we how we oh, how we hi oh, we oh. And as he went in and led him by the arm, singing as around, he came finally to the place where they sat the prince down on a mat with a birch bark pail full of water, and they took white buckskin and wiped his eyes with the water. And then they took more water and wiped his ears from with the water, and then they gave him a drink out of the water that they had there. And for those who, as I'm reading this, I'm going, holy moly, that's the condolence ceremony. That's one of the big ceremonies, the wiping of the tears. And say, I was greatly startled by the sound of your voice as you come to this place to the wood's edge, because of all the calamities that could have befallen you on your way here. Trees could have been fallen and you cross your path. There could have been wild beasts could have devoured you. Pestilences could have gone you, or you could have saw the pond where all the ancestors are and wanted to throw yourself in, or there would be people with weapons in the dark outside the cabin. So we give great thanks that you've come here. And we will now smoke together and we will console each other with very few words. This was done for every lieutenant governor and every governor that came to North America by our people. They were all given the washing of the tears, wiping of the tears ceremony. And that's what they did in Brantford. And after that, the prince stood by the fire, grasping the wampum, as you saw in the previous slide there, with the young fellow holding the wampum string. He stood by the fire and addressed the people in our language. I heard what you said to me, and that's how I'm going to govern myself into the coming days. That was recorded by the UELers and the IODE, and that's when they said, and on that day and at that moment, Canada was added as a rafter to the Longhouse of Many Nations. Let's go. There's a picture. It actually happened. I'm not making this up. There's a picture. I won't say anything about it. Believe your own eyes. Funny thing about Arthur, the Duke of Connaught, he came back to Schweigen, down 100 kilometers south of Toronto, to the Six Nations Indian Reservation, or Six Nations Indian Reserve number 40, Oswego, or Oswego, is what it's known. He came back in 1913. And significantly, what happened at that time, he was given the condolence again, because his mother had died in 1901. And so Arthur, when he came back, they wiped his tears again because Victoria had died. One other thing about that was Arthur, the Duke of Connaught, in 1913, was the Governor General of Canada. So joining with Canada and declaring war on the Kaiser, that's happened, and there are letters actually in the archives that show about our people saying their involvement with the war. 400 people went from here over there, and with the commemoration of Vimy Ridge recently, there are records from our families of our grandfathers going over there and participating in that. I had some uncles and grandfathers. My grandfather went to that campaign and we're in those first tanks and all of that stuff. Another story. But when the war ended, Edward, Arthur's cousin, came to Brantford. And if you go drive through Brantford, there's a park that has a cannon in it. It's called Victoria Park over on Colburn Street. And they had another ceremony. And they gave Edward the condolence ceremony, but they conferred on him a chief title. Deahonseya was the name they hung around his neck. And they said, we've got a rafter here, a Canada rafter, but it has no chief to talk to the rest of us. So they made Edward a chief, because the rafter needs a chief to be able to talk to the chiefs from the other rafters, because that's the role of the chief, to go and talk to the other nations and the other people about what we're thinking about stuff. That's their role, right? Fascinating fact. Edward became the King of England. Deahonseya, that Edward, became the King of England. So this is in Canadian history. This happened 100 years ago. And it's not taught in your schools for some reason that I don't know. You'll have to go ask the people that run your education system about that. But these events actually did happen. Queen Victoria in 1869, she declared all the native people in Canada to be members of the British Commonwealth in the late 1800s. She died in 1901. Arthur, her son, came back as Governor General of Canada to receive the condolence ceremony. His cousin Edward was conferred with a chief title and became Chief of the Canada Rafter. Let's go on. Just what I told you about. We got to have, there needs to be a place, a forum where people can talk. And that was what was created when Prince Edward was conferred with a chiefship title and later became the King Edward of England of the British Commonwealth. And there's the printed fragment from a history account of what happened. So in 1880, after Canada was adopted in, we have to brace Canada to the rest of the rafters. So here's what the chiefs did back in 1880 on June 21st. They adopted the Indian Act. It says it right there. These are minutes from the chiefs' records. The chiefs on June 21st, 1880, confirmed the acceptance of the Indian Act. Now, this was the Indian Act in those days was not the same document that we know today has control of our lives. That document was an instrument for Canada or the Crown to honor its treaty obligations. It was well known it had to have legislation, enabling legislation to allow a government to spend money. And out of that relationship, so the Indian Act braced the Canada rafter to the rest of the longhouse. And part of the agreement was this, it's right in there. 2 seats were going to be allocated in the legislature for people to sit there and watch the government govern over our affairs in Toronto at Queen's Park and in Ottawa. That was part of the deal. So the Indian Act was not put in place for the Crown to watch us. Actually, the chiefs adopted the Indian Act for the exact opposite reason, to keep an eye on them, because now we've braced the Canada rafter with the Indian Act to the rest of the longhouse. Of course, it became an instrument for all kinds of other stuff in the next 130 years or 140 years, but at that time it was thought differently. And makes a question. Romeo LeBlanc, who is Governor General, made National Aboriginal Day June 21st. Oh, that's because it's the solstice of the sun? Or does the Governor General know something about what happened to make Canada a country? Canada became a nation when it was braced to the rest of the longhouse on June 21st, 1880. Okay, let's go. So you have the Canada rafter adopted in. You have, as you saw at the start, the Trudeau and Harper, leaders of the Canadian rafter, and the things that they had to say about what happened in the 160 years since Confederation. And that there were certain events that we did to try to create then a relationship with the new Canada rafter. Is there another slide there? And in that rafter, when the adoption of Canada and it was given its own rafter, there was a duty and responsibility for people who are part of the Canadian rafter to become indigenous to this land. You were given a rafter to become indigenous to this land, the Canadian rafter. One thing, we don't call you settlers. That's your own eggheads and university researchers call you settlers. We don't do that, right? You call yourselves settlers, and the word colonizers comes in there, and all of those words come in there. But if you were adopted in and given a duty and responsibility to become indigenous to this land, I don't think I can call you a settler or a colonizer anymore. Because of the family of one long house idea, I have to call you cousins. And 2 prime ministers in a row said our cousins have been pretty creepy towards us. Did some pretty nasty things. So I can only ask you now, when you were given a duty and responsibility to become indigenous to these lands, did you? Are you? Is there another slide there, Jody? So the family of one long house in 1869 has a definite historical record that shows, and people can debate about, why things happened. I'm not debating why things happened. I'm just reporting and telling a story about what did happen. This happened. What does it mean? That's up for you all to think about. So this is why we say now, ne gadine yagwano shinido yagwadadi winio. Ne Yaguya non hawi chiniochi eti satsuragoha wadiragero. Wahine yon kiawine yakujiragero. Your ancestors and our ancestors made covenants a long time ago. And they were handed down to us, their children. And this is one of the covenants. What are you going to do about that is the question that we should all be asking ourselves. Where the sun rises is the eastern door, and where the sun sets is the western door, and the blue sky over our head is the roof of that longhouse, and everybody who lives in that longhouse are one family. There might be 35 million Canadians, but you only have one voice. There might be 2,000 Abenakis, but they also have a voice. There might be 40,000 Mohawks, but they also have one voice. Each of the rafters has a voice in that longhouse of one family. That's how it works. Where are we today? That is a discussion. Are we at the end of the slideshow there, Jody? There you go. The admission by 2 prime ministers in a row that our cousins have been pretty nasty to their other cousins from the other rafters. So you can shut that off, and I'm going to just pose a question, and then I'm going to shut off my camera and listen. And I'm going to ask Jody to come back in the room to participate in the conversation because she can moderate and facilitate the discussion. As the basis of our society is the mothers. Mother culture whispers in our ear wherever we go. Our conception of the good life, all the good things that are about us and what we want out of life come from mother culture whispering in our ear. And so I want to ask Jaclyn and Renee, and I'll step out of the way now. Don't put this all on us. I'm putting it on you. Having heard the story, what does it mean to you? And I'll step out of the room now. What does that story mean to you? And I'll hand the steering wheel over to Jody.
Well, you know me. I don't know if you ladies want to be in the car I'm driving right now. Because this to me, as Uncle Mike says, whispering, women whispering in the ears or grandmothers. That's grandmother's voice right now. This is a really big duty of our friends, our relatives to come forward and have these conversations. So thank you, Uncle Mike, for putting us in this position. And we do have some comments in here, so I'd like to leave some room for the comments of our visitors that are listening as well. But Jaclyn, I invited you in, because I love how you are always intrigued by the conversations that we have, and the work that you do in the school board has always inspired me. I think you're a really amazing sister, and we'll say non-Indigenous, just to kind of clarify, your role in the board. But you were intrigued first. You instigated the conversation, and then it led me to tell Uncle Mike about you and your passion for what you do. So what did you think about what he just shared?
It hit me in 2 ways. One, I feel so honored to be able to now say that I'm considered a cousin. I feel very, honored that I can be that I can, support in any way that I can. But I also was a little bit angry. I'm going to be honest. I'm a little bit angry that this event that happened, on October 1st in 1869 was not taught, was not shared, that I didn't know that Britain had joined as a nation to nation. And I think that's a really important language, because I'm not British, and I am a first generation Canadian, but to be part of one family, I think I keep thinking, where did we go wrong? I know where we went wrong. I know the history of where we went wrong, but why did we go wrong? And how do we now move from all of this pain that has been caused, all of this, as Uncle Mike said, all of this nasty stuff that we as cousins have done? How do we move forward in a nation to nation relationship where we hold each other up? And when he said we make sure that we're eating, everyone is healed, everyone is happy, and we protect one another. How do we move forward with that? Right? How do we move together? And I think that's part of why I'm here, is to help with that, to help amplify what has gone wrong, but also to move in a direction where we work for the good moving forward, where we all are eating, where we're all being protected, where we're all healthy and happy and living together side by side the way it was intended and the way it was promised.
Doesn't her voice excite you, Grandma? I love her. Thank you. Nyawa, Jaclyn.
As a grandmother, I think there should be more gathering of all the other grandmothers, and we could, because we've had so much life experience. And I'm speaking from a grandmother. It's different from the grandfather's view. And what we think about is all the hurt and pain that our children are going through. And if every grandmother could speak up of stopping that pain when their children have gone and got lost up in that trauma, it's continuing. It's continuing, and there should be more grandmothers involved in everything like they used to be, because the grandmother comes from that heart, and she doesn't want to see her grandchildren going through more pain, doesn't want to see bullying, doesn't want to see crime in the street, doesn't want to see all these things, because we've been through that. That's enough. And so as grandmothers, we need to come forward and say, stand together and acknowledge each other and hold up, make a circle of grandmothers, that circle that says enough's enough, and make our men accountable to those children, because what are they doing? They're not listening. They're only looking about the resources, the land and everything, and taking it from it immediately. They're not thinking 7 generations. They're not thinking 7 generations. They want to contaminate the water right now. And who is it harming? It's not just harming Indigenous people. It's harming everyone. And that's what those belts were all about, was that we asked, you make this agreement with us that as long as the grass grows and the water flows, that this is what you will do for our children's children, the 7 generation. When we say this, we meant all of us, for our children. This is for our children. Didn't say Indigenous, didn't say all these different nations. It says this, for this moment, for these children. And so our children deserve a better life. And it's going to change, because Mother Earth she's waking us up. She's got her hands on her hip and she's shaking. Enough's enough. She's going to show those one that only think from here. They need to think from here. And so what are they doing for the children? What are they doing? Look at all the men. They're all adults. They're the first thing they did was they took themselves out of their office, but they put their children. Those are the future. They should have been protected first. They should have been done something. That's how it was done originally. The children need to be protected first. The men are supposed to stand on the outside where the men would make sure that this is going to be done right. Making sure this is what all those men should be doing, is protecting that land. Making sure there's not going to be contamination. Making sure that the water is going to be drinkable for all children. Because what affects me affects you. That's what nature's saying. All the animals, all the creation, that's what the grandmothers are listening. They are hearing that. Whatever affects them is going to happen to it. How can they stand back and see those children, their children, crying in pain? Look at their hospitals. Look at those streets of crime. They just want to belong. They just want to belong, and that's what being. And there's that. You belong over there, you belong over there, you belong over there. There's no coming together under one roof. And this is what the grandmothers need to come, because we're coming from our heart. Even what they're inventing now. And what they're inventing is the shortage of our lives, our children's lives. They're causing addiction at a very young age. Because of dollars. They're causing marketing so that children's lost, their spirit is lost. They only look on the outside. Oh, I need to be in my finest. They don't look at what needs to be in here. And this is where I'm coming from, a grandmother, and I did something similar to what Uncle Mike did. I made cards that I will read. And this is what I witnessed. In 1643, as a grandmother, I observed the Silver Covenant Treaty between the Mohawk and the Dutch agreement. So I went through all this, what every era grandmother, 1645, 1730, 1732, I'm a witness to epidemic of smallpox, war, famine, death of the spirit. In our trails are cheers. Then as a grandma, I see us removal of land, hardship, less access to hunting and our traditional ways. Human trafficking has been here since a time. Where are our children? Enough's enough. The grandmothers, the poverty, hardship, and all those, this is what, as a grandmother, this is what we're witnessing. Not just Indigenous children, it's all the children. All the children. All the children. They are still put in residential school. At least ours is kind of put, we recognize that. We need to change our school system, because they only teach us to think with our brain, not with our heart. We've lost values in our schools. The one that gets to the top has to push down everyone else. Where we were taught that everyone comes together and goes to the top. No one is left behind. Then we talk about children that are living in the streets. What are they doing? They shouldn't have been there in the first place. They said a lot of our tradition of discipline was wrong. This is where it gives them guidance of their response, of their duty into this world. Everyone needs discipline, especially ourselves. And this is why there needs to be truth. So this is what I talked about as a grandma. I have witnessed. What has the First Nation have to show after 400 years? We have lost a lot of our land. We have lost a lot of the income. We have lost not only income, but we have lost our health and our well-being. And because it is affecting everyone. You know, it's sad, because I think of Queen Victoria. I have been watching some of her movies. Her history. Boy, she had a strong voice. She had a strong voice. And she's the only really one down in history that really made, was really thinking. And so these treaties was a promise that was made for all, that we would live in peace and friendship. So I'm just here to remind you to share the land in its wealth, no extinguishing of the rights, respecting each other's ways. So all we wanted was peace and friendship and respect of each other's ways. And so we ask, what are you doing today? What are you doing today? And so this is coming from a grandmother. And what I'm seeing now is our children. Our children being, as they say, there's healing happening, not just our children, because the grandmothers have been doing ceremonies. The grandmothers have been doing ceremonies for not just our children, but for all the children. This is why we're here today, right now, because we're praying for those future children. We're praying for them that they stand up again and brush themselves off and know their roles of speaking from their hearts. This is what I have witnessed. We have come through the fire of destruction and now bring forth the culture, the language, and the ceremonies of our people for the continuation of our Mother, the Earth, the seed of resilience. And so this is the words from the heart of a grandmother. And this is what I have to share today.
I can't help but say mic drop. Bam. I don't know. This conversation and the conversations that we've been having here on Grandmother's Voice are as organic as they come, right? We don't sit around and say, oh, what are we going to talk about? Actually, Mike brought some terminology to me this week, and I was like, oh, that's an understanding where you don't have conversations before you go and have the real conversation. You save that for the juicy part of your spirit speaking. And so I'm so grateful to be able to be a part of these conversations. And Mike, I don't know, are you coming back in the room? I just wanted to put that out there because I'd love to see you and share. I think that in this moment in time where we are in society, I think that, we've been confused. We have been lied to, right? There's just so much uncertainty. It was like the truth that, it's like that movie, You Can't Handle the Truth, right? And we're in that space right now where, Grandma, you've been saying we've awoken. People are awakening to this, and we have to get through language. Language is so important. But there's been a lot of things that have been deposited in our spirit and who we are as a society, as a people. And to be able to come forward in our hearts now and just say, I want to be vulnerable and learn how to survive today, loving my neighbor and knowing that that's okay. Because I think that that's how I feel when I show up in a space and people say, what are you doing? Why Grandmother's Voice? For a while, I had no idea why I was here. I just was following because it felt right to my heart. I actually got to that space. And so I'm very grateful for everything that you've been sharing, Uncle Mike, in this time. And Grandmother's Voice and what we've been doing is really just making space to have these conversations, to invite people to create whatever it is we're supposed to create together, whatever is supposed to change. And this opportunity is beautiful. And thank you to all of the people that have just shared love hearts. And I just want to share this message. This is so fascinating, Mike. Right? Thank you for sharing historical reasons for June 21st being the day chosen, bracing Canada to the rafters of the continent, the continental longhouse. It's a very moving way to think about this day. I hope that becomes more widely known. And it will. It's really, it gave us that idea for Grandmother's Voice because we have been sharing it in Halton for the last few years as a community about celebrating indigenous people, and now we can attach this, and that's what's so important, right, about sharing all of this knowledge. Thank you. Would you like
I have a question for Jaclyn. 2 days ago, Canada was voted by a jury as the best country on earth, #1. So when they came here and found democracy, which only existed here in the Americas, by the way, we taught them about democracy's basis is everyone gets to eat, everyone gets to be healed, and everyone gets to be happy. Apparently that was heard, because I think this, and I pose this to people, to my students who I teach at universities, right? So I meet a lot of Canadian students, and I say this to them: your national character is actually the social gospel. The social gospel tradition was a strong tradition. It's been documented. It's where the whole social safety net came out, the YMCA, the Salvation Army, or well, that came from England, but it had its roots here. The Young Women's Christian Temperance Union, the NDP, came out of that whole tradition. The CBC, the National Film Board, all of these parts of Canadian society that says there's parts of society that needs to help the other parts of society have a happy life. There's parts of Canadian society that has other parts of society helps them to eat, helps them to be healed, helps them to be happy. I wonder where they learned that. Because there's a social passion in this country that I see being eroded in the cosmopolitan globalization that's going on, where there was a distinct Canadian passion to be there for other people 40 years ago strongly, but now it's withering away. Or is it still there? I want you to respond to that, because I think that that's where we meet our social passion to eat, heal, and be happy.
Yeah, I found that so interesting that Canada was voted the best place or the best country. And, you know, from my perspective and my privilege, it is a fantastic place. I get lots and lots of, you know, my life is extremely happy. And then I think about, you know, some of the places in our country that don't have clean drinking water. How can this be a place that is #1 in the world when we have people in our country who are living in tents? You know, and this is, you know, to me, I think there's such a disparity there between two worlds. And so I always question that when people say Canada is the best, or like, what Canada are we talking about? And who is included in that Canada, that grouping? Because I'm not sure everybody in this country would say that it's the best place to be right now. You know, but I do think I agree with you, Uncle Mike, that we're becoming a little bit more selfish, a little bit more self-centered. You know, over time, where we're focused more on me and how I'm going to get myself farther in this world, rather than what you describe, you know, as Canada being built on, and what we learned from the first people through first contact, through that original relationship about helping one another and working together to raise all of us together. And so that is worrisome. I see us going down a path that looks very familiar, very similar to our neighbors to the south, and that's concerning to me. You know, and the, you know, Grandmother Renee, when you talk about your looking at life through a grandmother's eyes, after I had my children, I look at the world through a mother's eyes now, and it has changed the way I think about. That's changed the way I teach with young children. It changes the way I think about kids who are troubled, right? Who are on the streets, who are have addictions, you know, and how do we support, you know, the entire country, and especially our children and our youth. So I am really, thankful that you spoke about that for the time that you did.
I'm going to ask both of you one question very briefly before, as we wind it down, because I want to go back to Jody and see what any comments that pop out of cyberspace. But here's the question: in 25 words or less, where where do you think we start? Where do we start?
Do you want to go first, Grandmother Renee?
Yes. I was at McMaster and they asked that question. The class was doing reconciliation. I think I'm over 25 words now. But all I said, it starts from you here. Start walking in truth. Start speaking in truth, using the language of truth, coming from the heart.
25 words or less. I completely agree. I think it starts with me, ourselves being disruptors, challenging what people are saying, challenging what people are thinking in a way that works to build relationships, so that I'm not turning people off by challenging what they're thinking or what they're saying. And walking alongside and accompanying people, and then teaching my children, I think, and all of everybody that I come in contact with. I went past 25 words.
I think telling the truth is a good starting place, and in every global conflict zone on Earth, especially like in Rwanda and South Africa, they start with truth telling. And I think telling the truthful stories in all of the classrooms across the land and so on, and circulating what stories that come out of this, I think that's one of the starting places as well. Anything, Jody, that you saw that you'd like to bring to our attention as we wind down?
I kind of feel like I want to comment on that too, but I will look over here.
Oh, well, it's your show.
You keep saying that, and I'm like, really? I have resistance every time I turn this on. I'm like, really? Why is it me? But I think maybe this is my point: is courage. And courage to understand what your heart, what does that mean? Because sometimes when we're out there talking about equity and inclusion and diversity, all of these things that now society is labeled to put out there to say, okay, let's package this teaching real nice and gentle for those people out there learning. Like the reality is how, when you wake up in the morning, what do you feel? How what's in your way for you to really feel happy? And that's what I find that Indigenous ways of learning and knowing are really going back to just life and living in a not a I don't want to it's not simple, right? It's not simple. What's the word that you remind me to use instead of simple? A logical or way of living, connected to the earth. Watch the animals. This is how a lot of people need to begin. But so a lot of these messages are always the people that join us here are gracious and always just sending love. And this one is from Alberta. Like, this is great. People that are just showing up and saying thank you because they're awake and they want to know, how to support, I think, just themselves, each other. Everyone loves Grandmother Renee. And while we're saying that, Grandmother's voice really, when we connected, when Renee and I connected, and we knew that we were family, and it was like, what's our purpose? Our grandmothers brought us together for a reason. And what is that reason? And the reason is the legacy. In the last few days, I've been involved in conversations at a community level, and the conversations are about how people are, like, what's wrong with the systems that are caring for our elderly? Like, why are we not taking care of them? Why are we not taking care of our children? Why is it now about educating people on belief systems that shouldn't even exist? Like, so returning. I think you say things so humbly, Uncle Mike, and I think sometimes when you and I are talking in our, we'll say in the green room, is that what you called it? The green room? Before we go live, and it's like, let's not talk about the real issues right now, because you could say something that's really important to say to the real world. And I think that maybe that's why I'm here, is my filter is not, I'm in a place right now where it's like, wake up, people. How do you love? That's the heart thing, right? How do you remove all of the things that society and people, even our families, have placed on us because of experience in life, that has made us angry and all those things. So I'm really grateful that we had this opportunity. We've had viewers coming in and out and comments, and you can go back and see all the love that you got to Jaclyn. Some of your, probably, I don't know if it's friends or family, saying proud of you, look at this, right? But as we finish up this talk, I'd like to invite my family in, they're all of the family, to watch what we're doing here at Grandmother's Voice. We are divinely guided. Everyone that's involved with Grandmother's Voice is committed and works for Grandmother's Voice. We work for spirit, for our ancestors, for each other, to make change in the world, in our world, in our communities. And so I'd like to invite everyone. We're really building our community and our vision. And the next week we have our speaker series starting again. We have some aunties coming in from Saskatchewan, and really excited to have them on Tuesday. And we have some Grandma Renee and Uncle, Grandpa, I don't know what to call Neil. He's never serious. That's what I love about him. So they're having a talk, and we're still working out our details for Earth Day, which will be a very important day for everyone. I think we're moving into a place of action. As much as we have so much work to do, people are waking up. So I'd like to just ask everyone here if you'd like to share something before we exit the stage.
Renee?
For being a big part of this, because they opened this door through ceremonies. They opened this door so that this is what the people need to hear. And this is what makes us coming together and hearing the people and the communities coming together of all many nations. This is what it was. They call it, some have referred it as the eighth fire. And so what is happening is that fire of love for one another, for family. We are a family under one roof, and that's how we referred them to, as a family, our cousins. Even creation, we called them our family. So we never put anybody outside. And even my mom was very adamant. You don't ever say stepchildren. You're chosen children. So we need to, that language again, we need to watch that language, because we don't want to put anybody outside. We want to, as Uncle Mike said, belong, have all those needs fulfilled. So thank you.
And Jaclyn, what are you taking away from today, and how are you feeling?
What am I taking away from today? I can't wait to share this story, this history, with my colleagues. The first thing I'm doing is going to be connecting with my Canadian World Studies history teachers and sharing this information with them so that it gets into our high schools, into our high school history courses and our intermediate history courses, grade 7 and 8. So that's the first thing I'm going to do probably when I get off of this this call. But for me, I think continuing and talking about being one family is such a beautiful way to think about this country, to move forward together, to, recognize, respect, and honor one another in a way that allows us to not interrupt the other person's or other groups, other nations' history, tradition, culture. so that we walk side by side and to honor those treaties and those promises, those friendship promises that were the original intent.
Walking side by side is the issue. And we saw in that wampum belt, well, there's the friendship belt, and you have the 2-row handy. So you can, yeah, she's going to show you the 2-row. And what the 2-row is, it depicts a binary where we're walking together side by side, just like Jaclyn said, right? We're on the same road together. And this is where I want to end you with my thinking about today is this, is that we're on a road together walking side by side. And the covenant that we made a long time ago is that one about the rafters. So we're walking side by side. Now, think of the medicine wheel as the orbit of the earth around the sun. There's the medicine wheel. Think about our medicine wheel, which is the circle wampum, where we're bound together by the covenants that were made in very ancient times by whole numbers of families, right? And my last comment to you is this. All of us have gone 110,000 kilometers through space in the last hour and 10 minutes. Isn't that amazing to think about it? Time that we don't get back. And we hope we added something to your thinking today and your happiness, and that's why we do what we do. There you go, Jody.
I think I've talked enough. But the next time that we're together, well, Grandmother Renee and Uncle Mike are together, will be on April 30th. And that is titled Wiping the Tears to Invent the Future. And that will conclude this series. We're nudging Uncle Mike to think of another one, but that's for a conversation for another time, he says. So we'll get to that. Thank you so much. You know what? For all of the guests that were on our Facebook and StreamYard and YouTube, and having you here and then sharing with us your feelings and encouragement is so important to us. Thank you. Thank you all very much. Oh, Renee?
Yes, I see. One of the things they can start is not be ashamed to cry, because that heals your soul. That heals those wounds of grief. You're letting that grief go out, not being suppressed. Okay?
That's beautiful. Thank you. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone. And watch for Grandmother's Voice. Watch on our platforms to hear about all of the wonderful things that we're doing in our new space in Milton.